Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I'm George Conley with Scratch Golf Tips, and today we're going to be talking about driving range mats. I get a lot of questions about driving range mats. Should I hit off of them? Should I avoid them? Should I gravitate towards them? I'm going to answer them all, talk about the pros and cons, and more in this video. Before we dive in, just wanted to remind you, if you enjoy this video, please leave a like rating. That helps YouTube show it to more people. And if you want to see more videos from Scratch Golf Tips, feel free to subscribe to the channel. So in our minds, ideally, we show up to a golf course and there is a well-manicured driving range with plenty of green grass, no splotches in it, that we can play and practice and do whatever we need to do on at all times. But as we know, that is not always the reality. Not only do a lot of golf courses have limited space on their driving range, but also if there is a rainy day or some weather that comes through, it's not always realistic that we can get out on the driving range. And sometimes the alternative that these country clubs and courses come up with is a driving range mat. Now, for those who don't know, a driving range mat is a long piece of rubber, and on top of that is some artificial turf. Sometimes you'll see a fairway length and then a rough cut length, as well as a rubber tee, but that's the general gist of it. Now let's talk about why you should or should not seek out these mats. Now, the first thing that I want to address is it is much easier to hit off of a range mat than it is an actual driving range or any grass, because you get away with a lot more. Simply, I know that when I hit off of a range mat, I feel like I can go to the PGA Tour because I'm just not mishitting many balls, and there's a reason for that. If you're hitting irons, especially on the ground, and you hit the ball just an inch behind, or if you hit the ground just an inch behind the golf ball, that club is going to dig into the ground and you're gonna chunk it and you're gonna hit it 30 yards. If you hit an inch behind the ball on a driving range mat, it's just gonna slide under the ball usually, and you're gonna hit a fine shot. So you can get away with those types of shots much easier. So it really isn't constructive or realistic in translation to the driving range, and more importantly, in translation to the golf course. So that addresses how irons differ when they are played off of these range mats, but playing with drivers and playing shots off the tee is a whole nother ballgame. Now, when playing on normal grass, you can adjust your tee height however you want, and it's totally fine. It's regulated. It's exactly how you do it all the time. When you go to a range mat, you cannot stick your tee inside of a range mat very well. Often the tee will be way too tall. I know that when I play with my driver, I sky the ball up, and it's not very realistic because I can't really configure to that different tee height. Conversely, some of these range mats have rubber tees built into them, which for me are always far too low, and then I'm not hitting the ball solidly. It really does kind of mess me up when I'm hitting a driver off of a mat just because of that tee height. So while I hit irons better and drivers more poorly on a range mat, it doesn't matter because all of those shots on a range mat are not accurate to what I normally do on the golf course. So I'm not comfortable over these shots. Even when I'm playing and I hit 10 great iron shots in a row off the mat, I think, okay, this isn't really worth anything because I'm never going to have these lies on the golf course. It's kind of like putting on an artificial putting green. While that's a little bit more accurate because greens are much more mowed and confined than what you can have on a fairway, it's not true to life when you're on the golf course. Another thing that should be addressed when discussing golf mats is the damage to the clubs, which a lot of people have a lot of concern over. Oh, is this mat gonna ruin my iron? Is it gonna ruin my driver? In short, it's really not as prominent a difference as many people think. If there's some rubber and you have an old mat that has some rocks and gravel in it, sure, it's going to damage your club, but we have to compare it to what we normally hit off of. If you're hitting in the ground, off of dirt, compact sand, and grass, whatever you're normally hitting out of, it's going to damage it regardless. Your clubs obviously slowly will wear and tear. So there really isn't a ton of difference. One thing that a lot of people see from a cheaper range mat, if you're hitting irons and you're really digging into the ground, the friction of that club constantly going through may leave a green film on your club, which is just the plastic residue coming off of the artificial turf. But usually you can just peel that right off. It shouldn't stain the club. If anything, it'll just damage the mat a little bit more, but that's kind of an esoteric issue that not everyone runs into. But in short, if you're worried about damaging your clubs, I wouldn't. They're gonna get damaged regardless, unless you're hitting off of some really cruddy mats. And if that's your option, then I just wouldn't hit at all. Another downside to mats that a lot of people bring up is the higher risk of injury, because if you're hitting into the ground and you really chunk one, you can kind of sink into the dirt, sink into the soil, sink into the sand, wherever you're playing geographically, and it's a little bit more forgiving. If you really have a bad swing and you hit into dead rubber and under that rubber might be concrete, you are definitely more susceptible to injury, especially in the wrist. If you're a right-handed golfer, your tail wrist where you're releasing that club is absolutely more susceptible to injury. If you slightly chunk a golf ball, it's probably not going to matter. As I said, it'll slide. But if you really miss-hit it, I'm talking chunking a ball by 6 or more inches, then there absolutely is that risk of injury. So if you frequently have that miss where you find yourself really digging behind a ball, maybe stay away from mats because that risk of injury is much higher. So now the final consensus on hitting off of golf mats. Should you do it? When should you do it? When should you not? My opinion is the only time you should realistically be hitting off of a golf mat is right before a round, if you want to just warm up, loosen your muscles, feel out your swing a little bit, because the driving range is entirely closed. If you're on a range and there's a few spots open but all the mats are open, go to the range, get your spot, hit a few off of the ground, the real ground, and stay away from the mats. One thing that I 100% advise you not to do is actively practice or work on your swing independent of playing. So, you're going to the driving range for an hour and a half, not because of warming up, just because you want to make swing changes. Do not do that. Do not do any of that swing changes, dialing in the swing, working on tempo, anything like that on mats. It won't work. It won't translate to anything else. Stay away from it entirely. So there's my opinion on driving range mats. Let me know what you think, what your opinions are, as they may differ. Some of this, again, was opinion, how I feel. Some of it is just factual. So let me know your opinion and any facts that you'd like to bring up in the comment section below. I read and reply to all comments on these videos. As always, thank you all very much for watching. Play well and take care.